Fantastic. So we've started today's third Ellii Programme, and we are just about to start a workshop that's all around mapping organisational strengths, challenges, needs and goals. So I'm going to hand over to Shelley, who's going to tell us more.
Thanks, Michaela. Hello. So for those of you I haven't met, I'm Shelley. I'm Flourish's Programme Development and Support Coordinator. And I'm going to talk to you today about mapping organisational strengths, challenges, needs and goals. Now, you should have received this worksheet. Don't worry if you haven't got this to hand, but we'll resend it around after the session as well. So you've got it as a tool, because you may decide that you want to use this going forward, either as a tool that you use individually or something that you do collaboratively with the other team members in your organisational group. So if you haven't got this printed out or to hand, some of you might have a PDF reader, which means you can just slot your marks in as we go. A pen and paper is fine. So do grab a pen and paper if you don't have one already. I'm going to walk you through the tool and just explain what each of the categories mean. And as we go along, if you mark down for your organisation, whether you think you'd mark it high, so achieving really well, medium, so some areas for improvement, or low, really does require a fair bit amount more work. So the first section in the top left-hand corner is people. So we've broken this down into a few areas. So if you just note down high, medium or low. So, and with this, it's not about judging anything. It's really to try and get a very broad overview of where the strengths are in your organisation and where you should be focusing attention to improve. So don't worry about being hard on yourself or other people. This is really just an assessment tool. So in terms of you, so how strong would you say you are in your role? Are there any areas or skills that you could develop, training opportunities, any knowledge gaps? So if you can mark that high, medium or low. And then the same question for your team. So how strong is your team, if indeed you have one? Do they work well together? What's staff turnover like, or volunteer turnover? Sometimes that gives you an indication of how strong the team is. How stable is your workforce? And again, are there any skills gaps, particular areas that you think that you could be developing? Or are there any recruitment difficulties? So any areas that you can't get the right people to come and fill particular gaps? So stakeholders. So do your stakeholders support your mission well? Do they understand it? How strong is your network? So the people that you're connected with in and around your local area, in and around your particular sector, does that feel strong? Could it be developed? Now, in terms of customers, so think about both the quality of your customers and the quantity of the customers. So by quality, I mean, do you have a loyal customer base? So customers that return to you time and time again, that would speak positively about you. Do you have enough customers? You need to build on what you already have. Your numbers need to be higher in order to improve your trading. And do you think your customers are likely to remain loyal to you in the future? And this is something you can find out very easily just by asking them. Are they likely to recommend you to other people? In terms of your beneficiaries, so the people who benefit from your service. So do you feel that you're well connected to your beneficiary group? How well do you feel you're meeting their needs? Okay, so by now you should have a high, medium or low score for all the different categories in the people box. And don't worry if you want to put between high and medium or between medium and low. This is just a broad brushstroke. And now we'll move on to your proposition. So this is your idea. So we'll start off with the clarity of your social mission. So what is your mission? How clear is it? Is it single-minded? Has it got lots of different facets to it? Is that confusing, or does that work well? Is it well communicated? Do your stakeholders understand it? And all your stakeholders, so you've got your beneficiaries, you've got your suppliers, partners that you work with. Now, in terms of the quality of product or service to meet need, so how effectively do your products or services meet the need as stated in your social mission? in terms of sustainability. Is your proposition sustainable? So you might be thinking about funding streams. So are the funding streams likely to continue as they are? Are some of them potentially going to dry up? Might you need to develop new products and services to continue to fulfill your mission? Now, I should say, as I'm going through this, if there are any categories that you're not quite clear on what we mean, then do just come off mute and ask questions. And we'll have a few minutes at the end as well, just for you to go back and review what we've done. Now moving on to performance.
I was going to say, Shelley, I'm conscious we're throwing people into the deep end at the start of the day here, but what we're wanting to do is give you a real chance to reflect on these different aspects, because we see these as being quite critical to the success of running your organisation, and you'll see that later in the workshop. These phrases come back to us this afternoon, but giving you the time to think about these things now, even if it makes you go, oh, don't know about this, or just answering as well as you can, and thinking through honestly how you feel about certain aspects. Nobody's got all of this boxed off, even if they've been running for years, but I think giving yourself a chance to look at this will give you chance to have really good conversations shortly when we get into breakouts, and learn from others and share sort of experiences and help and progress these things. So
yeah, absolutely.
What we'll come to see shortly as well, as I'm sure Shelley's going to say, is it doesn't always, for the stage of the development that you're at, or for the type of organisation that you're running, it may or may not be that important, as to whether you're high, medium or low, in terms of, some of these areas will be more critical to where you're at right now than others, but mapping the lot leaves no stone unturned in a way, does it, Shelley?
Absolutely. And I think like Nicola says, even the most established organisations won't be scoring high across all of these, even the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, they won't have all of this nailed down. And it's just a method for prioritising and working out which areas you should focus on. And I think for organisations that might be towards the beginning of their journey, it's also just thinking, well, I might not have even thought about some of these areas. We might be doing really well and applying lots of our time and focus over here, but I've not thought about, for example, sustainability of funding streams for next year. So it's really just to start the thinking process. Then, to move on to performance. So in terms of reporting, so as social organisations with some form of mission, whatever your legal status is, you will have some objectives, some goals. And in terms of reporting, how robust do you think your impact measurement processes are? So how effectively are you evaluating what it is that you're doing, how well your service is meeting needs? Do you think you're gathering sufficient data? Do you think you're analysing it well? Are you reporting on it well?
And that reporting as well, in addition to impact, obviously, also, in terms of, do you feel confident and comfortable when you're reporting back to funders and backers? Are you organised and on time when you're reporting back to Companies House or the Charities Commission or your own board, in terms of financial reporting, or have you even thought yet around putting key performance indicators together, things that you might have had in a day job or a previous career? How are you tracking and reporting and the performance of your organisation at large as well, both financially, staff delivery, if you have staff, and impact, clearly, as Shelley said?
And the reporting, it can be relatively simple, again, if you're at early stages, but just to make a start on what is it you're trying to achieve and what are the key measures for tracking whether you're hitting those targets. And then in terms of the impact itself, so are you genuinely making the impact that you want to? And again, this can be qualitative and quantitative. So are you making enough of a difference to your service users? And then if you are you reaching enough people? Do you want to increase the number of people that you're benefiting? And then endorsement of track record. So what are people saying about you? Do you know what people are saying about you? Do you think you're generating positive word of mouth and developing a good reputation? I can see people busy filling in, so I'll give you a moment or two to catch up. And now looking at resources, so capital, money. So do you have access to capital? enough money to do the activities that you want to do. Now, overheads, and what we mean by this is, do you have sufficient resources to operate your organisation? And this can be anything from, do you have the equipment you need? Do you have materials, workshop materials, office supplies, premises if you need them? It might not be that you own or rent premises, but do you have access to them, and can you fund it if needed? In terms of marketing and PR, do you have the capabilities to market and promote your organisations and activities? So do you have sufficient funds to do it? Do you have the right skills in your team to market, promote, publicise what it is that you're doing and reach the people that you want to? In terms of people and services, how strong is your team? How strong are the services that you offer? Do you feel that you're well staffed enough to provide the quality of service and the level of service that you want to? And finally, impact, again, coming back to that impact. And this time the impact is, do you have sufficient resources to make and measure the impact that you want to, rather than just reporting on it? And then the final section, the plan. So how clear is your plan? Do you have a plan? Do your wider team and your organisation as a whole understand the plan? If you asked the people that you work with, what is it we're trying to achieve and how are we doing it? Would they be able to say, oh yeah, this is what we're trying to achieve, and these are the 3 key things we're doing to achieve this? So format, what format is it available? Is it written down on the back of an envelope and stuffed away in a drawer, or is it available for people to be able to access? Is it on your website?
And we're certainly not judging you on any of this. We're all guilty of, keeping a lot in our heads, particularly if we're running small organisations, or even if we're running larger ones and we've got new projects on the go. It's just giving you a chance to think about where you're at with this stuff, and is it appropriate for what you need to do, and is it, what's stopping you? We'll get into conversation shortly in strengthening areas that you perhaps need to improve on. We'll get into.
Absolutely, and later on in the programme we'll look at some very shorthand ways of checking that you can do this. So I remember when I first started out in my career, you're expected to do a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, pages and pages of documentation. There's lots of shorthand ways of doing things, so you can get things down and communicate them widely to your team very easily. It doesn't have to be a massive process, but having, say, a 3-point plan can be a really useful thing that people are aware of. So usability, and I think that the best test for this is, do people refer to it? Can they use it? Is it being used? Credible information. So is it based on credible information? So about your organisation, but also about the wider environment, the context in which you operate. This could be everything from the political context, the social context, policy, your audience, specific local needs. Are there any gaps in your knowledge, again, about your organisation and about the environment in which you're operating? And then credible figures. So are you confident that the data behind your plan is reliable? Do you have all the figures you need to develop a strong plan, but also to communicate your need and how you're meeting that need? So I'm just going to give everyone, I can still see people are filling things in, a moment or two to carry on and complete their ratings. And then you can see in the final box on the bottom right-hand side of the worksheet, we've got overall areas to improve. And if you could just do a quick scan of each section and come up with a general high, medium or low for each of the areas. So then you can see at a glance, which is the area you need to do a bit more work on, or a key area to prioritise. So hopefully by the end of this, we'll come up with a high, medium or low for people, for proposition, for performance. Oh, we've got 2 peoples in there. I should say that people, just ignore the second people, for resources and for plan. And like Nicola says, it might be that some things just aren't urgent or important for you right now. And you'll have a sense of that. You'll have a sense of which things you need to work on. And again, if anyone's got any questions about any of the sections, you can come back or drop something in the chat. Oh, I can see the chat boxes. That's fine. Anyone, just ask any questions you have. Great, so it looks like most people are coming to an end. Has everyone got?
And it's an ongoing thing. It's one of those things where, it's up to you, Luella. You know, whichever way. I would say if you're low in an area, that's where you would need most work. If you're, you can use whichever scale you like.
Yeah,
whatever
whichever way around
to you, if that makes sense.
Whichever
I would do this. I would say, you know, where have I got a high level of strength, a medium level of strength, or a low level of strength? And if I've got a low level of strength, that's area that, or even medium, that might be an area that needs some work. But you know, everybody's scales work slightly differently, don't they? So, and you know, there are some people who use this and they score themselves, you know, 1, 2, or 3 and tally up scores. It depends how, you know, it's very much an art, not a science, this tool, and it's about getting a gut feeling and offering yourself some time to be honest with yourself around how things are going, patting yourself on the back where actually you've got those things, you're feeling happy and comfortable with the way those things are working, or even if you think in the main something's right, there might be a bullet point we've thrown into the box here that you hadn't thought of. So you know,
what's really a really interesting thing to do is to do this as an individual and then with your team as well, because sometimes the perspective of somebody who's working with you might be quite different to what the perspective of you, as you know, with an overview of the whole organization. And it's a really good start point for if you have a strategy away day, or just, you know, even a strategy away hour, some time to think about where you take the organization next or what you do as a group. It's a great place to start because it focuses the mind, and it's a start point for having conversations. So, for example, if, you know, 4 people in your team come up with the same thing, that's a great place to start unpacking what is it that we should be focusing on, and how should we take this forward, rather than starting with a totally blank piece of paper. So it's one to, you know, keep in your toolbox, and hopefully, you know, by the end of this program, you'll have a few of these tools that you can put in your toolbox and refer back to as and when you and your team want to do some planning and some organising.
I'm letting you know, Shelley, I've set up some breakout groups now. So if you want,
brilliant, thank you.
Ready to move into those, I can open them when you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do is use your answers to start to identify what is coming up as in need of attention. And then we're going to get together in action learning sets after the break to start to address some of these key issues. We'll introduce you to action learning, and it's just a really useful way. So once you've identified what the key need to focus on is, this is a way of thinking about how to move forward and getting unstuck with something that you might be struggling with. So I think we're going to come back at about, we're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes on this. Is this right? Is that right, Nicola?
Yeah.
Brilliant. And what we'd like you to do,
you've got a good slide. Say people have got a good 10 or 15 minutes actually.
Brilliant. So we're putting you into groups of 2 to 3 people, and just have a quick check-in. How did you find it to use the tool? How did you find the exercise? Did anything come up that you might not have been aware of, or you might not have thought about? And what's coming up particularly for you as areas to improve? Are there any surprises there? What would you say is most urgent or important? And then from that, we want you to choose a challenge that you'd like to work on in more detail with your action learning set after the break. So general group feedback around how you found the tool, what's coming up for you, and what challenge, what area would you like to work on? And if we could ask you to all write down what it is that you'd like to work on next, we'll come back to those.
So I'm going to open the breakout in a minute. You'll have a good, I think we'll give you a good 15 minutes. You can find out who's who, and as Shelley said, pick up on some of these points. We'll come back in about 15 minutes. We're not going to ask for loads of feedback because some of this is kind of personal to your own individual organisations, but for anyone that wants to share stuff, we're interested to listen to see what is coming up for people, so that we can be adapting our future sessions according to need, but also it's helpful to see where, you know, where people have got similar or different challenges, because the whole point of peer learning and action learning is to kind of support one another to kind of fill those gaps or offer complementary experience in addressing some of this stuff. So we will capture a little bit of that before the break. That will take about 11:05. So we're good for time. We're going to give you, as I say, 15 minutes in groups, and we'll give you a little nudge or you know, a note to let you know when you've got 5 minutes or a few minutes left. If anybody needs anything, you can always come back into this main room, or give us a shout, and we can come into breakouts if you need that. So just going to open all rooms. I think we've got a good, I've just done them randomly, looking down the list. We've got a good spread from what I can see in terms of different kinds of organisations across the different groups. So most people have got 3 or 4.
Come back about
yeah, and we'll come back about 5
to 11. Yeah.
So if you should have a little invitation to say join your breakout group, and we'll ask you to do that. And I'm going to stop our recording for now, and we'll come back shortly. So we've just come back from our breakout sessions and had some interesting feedback from the tool. And I think lots of people found that tool fairly useful, and it was good to really get down to the nitty-gritty and granulate things. I think for some, seeing all of that up in one file swoop is a little bit overwhelming, and there's a lot to think about there. And people at different stages of their venture, you know, will take what they want and leave what they don't want from that tool. But all in all, a good starting point for thinking things through. And from our groups today, we found things like a need for resources, a need for where do you find the time to write the bids, thinking about strategic plans, and looking at how you manage running an organisation alongside managing your own lived experience, whether that's you know, trauma experience, other sort of life experience. So lots of different things to think about for our groups, and we hope that anybody listening to this on recap has found it useful to think these things through themselves. So if you want to get in touch, all of the details are on our YouTube page, and we'll happily try and help where we can.